Hello and welcome to day 7. Today we're going to work on some of the battle screen changes that we have to make. I did some testing and came across a simple fix for making sure that our sort of background sprite and sort of our sprites on the screen stay the same aspect ratio, the same scale, regardless of the screen size. So that's going to be a handy thing to implement. I'll show you how I do that in a second here. Hope you guys are having a good morning so far. Get into the changes that I've made so far since I was out. So I didn't really change much from yesterday, from Friday, that is. Just trying to take a look here and see what I can do to improve upon what we had before. So one thing I did was I changed the half width and half height here in our orthographic projection matrix to be a static width and size. That means no matter what screen size you have, your pixels will stay the same. And excuse the map completely breaking when you resize the screen. Not entirely sure why that happens, but I will look at fixing that in the future. So you can see here, I can get our screen positioned right. Almost. Close enough. Alright, so no matter what screen size we have, and you can see the aspect ratio isn't preserved, so we'll have to do something to fix that in the future. But essentially, no matter what aspect ratio we have here, our screen is scaling the pixels, like the sprite is scaling depending on this size here, 1920 by 1080, not the screen size. Which is good. This is what we want. But as you can see, like if you have an aspect ratio window size that's different from the image size, you get this really bad sort of stretching and that you don't want, because the aspect ratio is not the same as the screen, the screen's width and height. So essentially, the pixels in our window here are stretched out to be 1920 by 1080, even though we don't have the height available for 1920 by 1080. It's still stretched out to be that. So I think a solution would be to either A, force people into certain resolutions, i.e. ones that are the same aspect ratio as our target, in this case 1920 by 1080, which I think is 16:9 or 16:10 if I remember right. The other solution is to scale this resolution here by the screen's width and height, but preserve its aspect ratio. And that might be more effective. But the thing you have to kind of realize is, like, some screen sizes, like this really wide screen here, you're going to have either black boxes or, you know, you're going to have some sort of issues on the sides where you'll have boxes. And maybe that's fine. And same with really tall, you know, you'll have to change this so it's a little bit different. I think for right now, and we can mostly change this in the future, but for right now we're going to maintain screen sizes that have the same aspect ratio as our 1920 by 1080p here. One thing that you'll notice is that the map view has that same constraint, 1920 by 1080, which means that the pixels here have that same scale, and so they kind of look wrong in a lot of cases. It's just flat out wrong. They don't look as crisp and as smooth as before because they're not scaled to the size of the window, they're scaled to this arbitrary size. So I think what we need to do is make a few more changes to this to allow us to pass in a width and height to the orthographic projection. And I think we can do that really simply just by having something like this. And we'll want them to be options, because we don't always want to set the width and height of the screen. Oops. And then our default for that would be none. In some cases though, like here, we'll want to actually accept a optional width and height. And I think the best way to do that would be to do something like hub function new 2D with size. Let's say that. And then we'll take a vector here, size. And then that returns self. And then essentially we're gonna copy all this stuff in here into here, and we're gonna make this optional. And now that I'm saying that, I think we should probably just make this a size. There's no reason to make it not a vector 2. Let me just check the volume levels here to make sure. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I am using NVIDIA's AI for the microphone, so it should cut out a lot of the background noise and make my voice a lot clearer. So just let me know how that works, if you think that works good or not. Yeah, so continuing on here, we have the size that we're setting here. Make sure that we set this size here to none. And it's optional, right? We made sure that it was optional here. Yep. Okay, and then in here we do self 2D with size, and we just pass none. Oh, without the semicolon. And actually, this doesn't have to be an option here because we definitely have the function requires a size, so it doesn't make sense to make that an option. Well, if we want to reuse it, I guess it makes sense just to try to dry the code up a bit. The other option would be to just have a function that creates most of this except for the projection, I think. No, it's good like this. I like it like this. And then you'll just pass size into here. And the only other change that we need to make would be inside of our update here. We want to essentially, when we're doing our calculation here, we want to check the right thing. So we're gonna say width, well, let's see, width equals self dot size. is sum. Do it like this. Self.size.unwrap x. Actually, let's do it like this. Let's make this a tuple that we pull out. Make sure there's a comma there, period. There we go. Else, our size is going to be width, height, and that with the semicolon. And then here we can say width, height. So now in this particular case, if I rerun, we'll use the default orthographic projection camera settings, in which case we should have the width and height of the window as our scaling size, as our orthographic projection size, which means that our pixels will look a lot better because of that now. And you can see here, we can zoom in a lot closer, pixels look less weird. But now here, this is now scaling with the size of our camera, because we haven't made the changes and adjusted that yet. So that's going to be up next, is we're going to add a new camera for the battle screen. The question is, do we want that camera to be around all the time or only when the battle screen is around? And I think it's fine if we make it so that it's only around for when the battle screen is around. Then we can just get rid of it otherwise. So I think right now we're spawning the camera in the map entity. It's just a little bit weird. We're just going to copy that over to here. Just clean it up some here. Import the custom orthographic camera projection. Alright. Now we have to pass a vec2 into it. With our target size. And then that's a option, so if you just wrap it with a sum, it should be good enough. And then I also want to insert on that same entity the game state that is associated with that particular camera. Make sure we remove that semicolon. And then we're just gonna expected value found enum. Enum is defined here. Oh, I'm using a period instead of the day job is interfering with my coding style in Rust. And then same thing here, except this isn't going to be the battle view. This will be our map view. And eventually we're going to want like a spawn map view system that runs, which would then spawn some more of these things. But for right now, this is fine. And we might even want to separate out the camera, depending on how like involved we get with that. We'll see. Now the next thing I need to try to figure out here is how we can disable this camera when we get to the battle view, and how we can enable this camera when we get to the battle view. Obviously this one spawns when we go into the battle screen. And one thing that we're not doing yet is cleaning up or destroying our entities once we leave the battle screen, which is important. So we'll need like an on exit to clean up some of this data. Because right now we're creating a new one each time you enter into the battle view game state. So let's just do some. Let's just think about this for a second. I think we want to come over to the visibility. I think we want something similar to this, but for updating the camera. Like update camera for state. So camera doesn't appear to have what we want on it. But I have a sneaky suspicion there's something that's similar to this that we want. Something that says this is the current camera. Makes me wonder if there's like a camera bundle. Active cameras. Here we go. I see. So our camera is probably in this active cameras list here. The question is, how do we make sure that it is that we're switching between it? In fact, maybe there's an example for this in the examples. Doesn't appear to be any camera examples here. Despite too many. That doesn't switch cameras. Parenting, 3D, MSA. Visits game, input, reflection. Maybe we should create an example of that when we actually figure that out. Creates two windows and cameras remaining the same mesh. That's close to what we want, but we want to actually switch between. We want one window and switch between two cameras. And I'm pretty sure active cameras is how we're going to do it. So this system takes the active cameras, which is a resource, and a query for all the camera entities and camera components. And then it says if there is an error, meaning the entity doesn't exist in the query, then it returns true or false. And if it's true, then we set the active camera entity to none. If the active camera entity is none, then we try to find a camera There's also this current name too. Current name equals name. Where's current name? Where's name come from? From active camera. It's unclear to me how to switch between two cameras using this code. I think you would want to remove the camera name and add the new camera, but looking at this code, I feel as though when you hit this, well, I guess not, because no, yeah, if you hit this code, no, it should be good. I guess we need to look at active cameras in the Bevy repo and see if it's used anywhere else. I mean, I'm sure it is, but the question is, how do cameras get added to that? It's a camera node. Because there is a add. That's what we want to look for here. It's not done in there. From calling. It's not gonna do it either. I don't think this is going to do it either. We can check though. Add camera. Ah, here we go. So the pass node sets the camera. Cool. What does that though? Camera 3D, camera 2D. Let's see how add camera is used here. Second window pass. I don't think I should have to create a whole nother pass for this. It seems like I should be able to swap what camera is the current camera. Add 2D camera. 2D. Oh, right. Okay, so when we let's go back to ortho. We specify the camera name here. Because it's camera underscore 2D as the name, the Bevy renderer uses that. You can see here, it adds that camera name to there. So I think what we can do, and maybe this is kind of messy, but we should be able to say name equals, let's see, is name a option? Yeah, so if we say name is none, and then here we say camera dot name equals, we look here, base camera to string, basically copy this code here. Except in this case, we want it to be the opposite of what we're doing. Oops. Close that. There we go. And then we have to figure out where base is coming from. new song there. So render graph base. Okay. Can I auto import that? Yeah. Oh, you know what? We didn't actually use this. So when we're switching, we also need to have a with system game state. Same with the map view. By the way, if anyone knows how to add a system that runs whenever the game state changes, that would be cool. So I don't have to keep manually defining that. So if I hit P, it doesn't appear to have worked. Because we still have the old camera, not the new one. Actually, we don't need the transform here in either case. Just clean that code up a bit. So my guess is there's something else that we have to do here to let the system know what the current camera is. I think it has to do with that active camera again. So if we go back to, let's see, camera, active cameras. So you see here we have a name and active camera. I think what we need to do is remove and re-add it from this, essentially, because the entity that the camera has is wrong. It's already stored in here, so when it comes through here, it's gonna say, okay, do I have an entity for this particular camera? And if I do, then, you know, it doesn't do anything here. The only time it removes the entity from the active camera is if it no longer exists with the query. So, which our camera still exists, it just has a different name. So this is going to return false, I believe, not true because there's no error. In which case, it's not going to clear out the entity and put the new one in. So what we have to do is basically loop through the active cameras in our system here. Once we've done this, let me make sure I do it right. Copy that. Yeah, so essentially what we want to do is this. I think. Field cameras obstruct active cameras is private. That is true, but I think we can call iterate mute directly on the active cameras class here like this. Except that's going to give us an active camera class, which is Oh, just the values, not the names. Which is fine, I think. Something like this. It's just the value of it. Bindings, name. Okay. So if we clear it out like that, that should force this system that runs here to give us a new entity, I think. Again, this is something that I think Bevy could improve upon, camera switching. And how the renderer handles cameras should be a little bit cleaner than that. But yeah, there we go. That's what we wanted. So as you can see, like our map camera, even though we're scaling, we're zooming way out. Once we switch to our battle view, we're switching cameras and forcing an update so that the new camera entity for the active camera is the one that we want it to be. And it's going to do that because the name is switching here. Essentially, only the active camera, the one that's going to render something, is going to have this camera 2D name, which is what the renderer expects in order for it to find the camera that it should render, if that makes sense. And then because active cameras are a little weird, we have to clear out the entities for all of the active cameras. In our case, that's only going to ever be one because we don't have more than one active camera. At least, I hope we don't. In this particular use case, we should only have one active camera. And then the system in active cameras will then replace that with the camera that has the name camera 2D. Because our camera before it had that same name. Hopefully that makes sense. That's a bit of a weird thing. Maybe there's an easier way of doing it and I just did it the hard manual way, but I think that could be a lot better in Bevy. Okay, so just want to commit here because that's a good, like, sort of, not stopping point, but like a good place to commit. We've finished the feature. We've got the camera switching like we expect, and we're seeing that we can switch back and forth between them. The one downside with the method that we have currently is the more we switch, the more new entities we have, the more new cameras we have, which is not what we want. It also means that we would have potentially multiple active cameras. I wonder, probably just the renderer takes the first one it finds. And in our particular case, that doesn't really matter because they're all the same. But for memory purposes, we definitely want to clean up the stuff that we create and spawn when you enter into the battle view, if you will. But for right now, this is a good place to sort of commit, and that way we have some of that history there. And if we need to, we can revert back to this particular commit if we mess something up, or at least do a history compare to see what we changed between now and then. So we're just gonna say implemented camera switching by updating the name of the camera. Added a new camera for the battle view. Added the ability to pass width height to our ortho camera. Let's see, where do I want to go now? Probably, let's go to here. Spawn battle screen. We want something called destroy. I don't know what does Bevy use for cleaning up? Like what sort of names does Bevy use? I think we want to try to stick with something like that. Like if you're cleaning stuff up, what do you call it? The ECS guide should have something like that. Like there's startup system, there's score check game over system. Those are all pretty well. Yeah, like startup system. In our particular case, we don't really have startup systems. We have like state change systems. So here's an example of state. Setup menu, setup game, and I think those are, it just keeps those around in memory all the time, which is another option we could do. Is instead of oh no, there is a cleanup. Here, cleanup menu. I missed that. Oh, despawn recursively. That's interesting. So there's an entity that's the higher, like sort of the parent for all the entities under the menu, and then you just pass in that one menu entity, and it will despawn all of the ones, all the other entities under that entity. I kind of like that. So, oops, wrong screen. So in our particular case here, what we could do is we could, for our battle location struct, well, right now it's just a resource, or a enum, I mean. We don't really have any state right now for the battle view, but I think this would be a good case for having a state for the battle view. And we could say, like, here's the top level entity for it. And then when we go to despawn, all these entities would be attached to that entity. And then when we go to despawn, what we would do is essentially just remove the same code that we see here. So that leaves me to wonder, with children, and then the parent spawns. I see. Okay. I was gonna say, how do we do that? How do we make them parents? How do we make a parent? How do we make children? But it seems like it's pretty simple. So here we're going to have a new resource that gets inserted. Can we do that with the commands? Insert resource, yes. Okay, cool. And that resource is going to be struct battle view. Were we using that anywhere else? I don't think we were. Yeah, just the game state battle view, which is fine. It's okay if they have the same name. And then public entity. So essentially that holds, that's what's going to hold actually like this. That's what's going to hold all of our battle view entities. And then I think it was with, oh well, we have to do it like this. That's right. I guess we need the entity. with children, parent, and then all of this stuff here would go inside of here. And instead of commands being what we used, we will use, I think parent is what we want. And then now we can create our cleanup function, or system, that is. And this should be really simple. We're just gonna have the battle view resource. And that would be a mute, I think. Does it have to be mutable actually? Let's look here. No, it does not. So, like that. Yeah. And then, why is this complaining? Found and mute commands. Alright, what does this do here for the menu? Children. Current entity unwrap. Apparently that doesn't exist, so we're doing something wrong. Let's take a look here. It's commands current entity unwrap. Shouldn't this already be an entity though? It's not. Interesting. So we just do this like this. This seems a little weird to me. There is no current entity on commands. Maybe it does exist. I mean, telesense is probably not working right. Maybe. Should there be like a ID? What does ID do? Yeah, that would work, right? Yeah. Alright, and then now we just do battle view dot entity. We will need commands here again, I believe. Not like that though, like this. And then, yeah, it's commands dot despawn. Recursive. Is there something I'm missing here? Because it doesn't seem like commands has that. Maybe there's... Switch to 5.0 here. it's slightly different, and I don't know what commit I was looking at before. Okay, so entity. It helps if you're on the right thing. Yeah, ID was the right thing they used there. Okay, cool. So we get the entity by using the ID, and then once we get the entity, we do despawn recursive. Alright, so then now we have this despawn system, and then go back to our systems here. And so now we need a new system set. On exit, game state, can't type battle view with system. Clear battle screen. I'm gonna put it here because I think it makes more sense here. Battle view. I think it does anyways. We really need to start breaking this up too before it gets too complicated in here. Like, these absolutely could go in their own plugin that this uses, and there's no reason for us to sort of include it in this plugin. Oh, we don't want to commit. We want to run. See if we have any errors. The question is, how do we verify that it's being despawned? Like, am I just building memory right now because I'm doing that? Let's see. Doesn't appear like it. 214.7. Well, it went up, but it's back. It goes up and down. That's not necessarily an indicator that it's working correctly, but it should be. And I do like how clean that is. It makes a lot of sense. Okay. Just trying to see if the map texture, or rather, sorry, our background texture is loading in when we expect it to load in. And I don't remember where we actually have, like, the load code anymore. Must be around here somewhere, though. Loading system. Right here, the setup system here. So it's gonna load everything in load folder textures map. Yeah, so I think what we want is to also say textures, which is kind of asset server. Like the only reason why we're calling load folder here is just to get the handles for that particular, like everything under map, which is just the road sprites. But this will actually load all of the textures. I'm pretty sure this is cached as well. So even though we call it here, like it's not gonna duplicate loads here. Hopefully. I hope the asset system is smart enough to not load things twice if you tell it to load the same folder, but let's find out. Yeah, I don't know if that's any faster or not, but maybe a little bit. So essentially this system right here is not the system that it's doing a little bit more than what it probably should for being a part of the map plugin. Okay. Well, now that we're done with that, I want to go ahead and grab a sprite for our player for sort of our battle view, load that in, and then also load in the enemy. And then we're gonna have to do some work, and I think we'll get to this today, where we're loading in the correct enemy based on the player hitting the enemy on the map. And for right now, we'll just do like the current player's, the one that they directly land on. I think in the future, maybe if there's nearby enemies, like one tile away, those would count as well. Yeah, but for right now, this should be fine. So one thing we'll need though is we'll have to check all the enemies and then check to see how close it is to the player. Just do a sort on all of them and grab the closest one. If our enemies were on a grid, it would make it easier because then we could just check, okay, here's where the player is, find the neighbors of that tile that the player's on, and then you could find the enemies that way. But I think we want to keep it more fluid than that, if that makes sense. Like, not so rigid to the grid. Yeah. So for now, the rest of that stuff's fine. Yeah, alright, well, I'm gonna take a quick break. I gotta get some water and stuff. It's important to stay hydrated and just stretch my legs. And when I come back, we will implement more of the battle screen. I feel like a lot of stuff we've done is just kind of clean up the work that we did on Friday. We didn't really spend a lot of time coding on Friday, but today we spent a lot more time cleaning up our code on how we actually open up the battle screen and how we despawn things, which is important. Important things to do. And now that that's part's sort of out of the way, we can work more on sort of expanding upon the battle screen. and getting more stuff in there. But anyways, I'm gonna take a quick break and I'll be right back. Hello, I'm back. Alright, so we have our Huntress here. If we take a look, we can see it's a sprite sheet. We're gonna go with the idle animation for right now, so I'm just going to sort of copy this. And let's see, File Explorer. We'll create a new folder, we'll call it characters. And then Huntress. And we'll put idle in there. Oops, just want to make it lowercase. Alright, so that's done. So the question we have here now is, we sort of have these two different views, and we have a player on both, like a player sprite for both different cases. And in this particular instance, like, we want to have a party, right? So like the player sprite that's on the main sort of map view, if you will, it isn't necessarily representative of the party as a whole, but when you're in the battle view, you'll want to have all the different sort of people in your party, sort of their sprites showing up. And right now we're very like one player focused, and I think that's fine. I think I want to say like one party member focused. I think that's fine. But the question is, how do we differentiate sprites between the two different worlds? And I think the answer to that is to use the player entity as a parent, and the sprites have their own entities that are then attached to the battle view or the map view. And then when we switch, we can see both of them. So if we go back to the player spawner, which is in here, we can see we load the player sprite in. And we're going to call this map player texture handle. And same with the material here. So yeah, essentially what it's going to look like is something more like this. Once we remove that. Parent. And then, oops, stuff is going to go up here. Right. So we spawn the parent component. We attach the player's sort of struct to it, which has all the information about the player. And then the sprites for the player are spawned underneath that entity as new entities. And then they have their own map view and stuff. So now we can spawn the other one. However, it's going to look much different because we want to have animations. So we're going to have to figure out how to do that in Bevy. I think it's pretty straightforward though. And there is an example about how to do that. I believe it's this, yes, here it is. Yeah, so we'll actually have a texture atlas. So the first thing to do is to load the battle layer texture handle. We can make that simpler too. Asset server dot load textures characters huntress idle.png. And that error will fix itself. Right now it doesn't know what it is, but when we actually spawn the entity, we'll be using it. Actually, as soon as we use it in the texture grid, it should be fine. And the texture atlas, I mean, sorry, no, texture grid. Yeah. Okay, and now that we've done that, we need to change the number of columns that it has, because our character's right has, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 columns, not 7. And then the size of our tile in the atlas is much different, and we need to figure that out. The easiest way to do that is we know we have 8 sprites, and we can look at to see how big this image is. Let's go ahead and load it into here. Let's see. We open file, characters, huntress, idle. It's 1200 pixels wide, so just 1200 divided by 8. 150 pixels, and then we know that it's 150 pixels tall as well. So back to here, we can change this up to 150 by 150. And then next up, we want to take a look back here. So we have to store the asset, the texture atlas in the asset as an atlas asset. And then that gives us the atlas handle. And we'll have to do something completely different when we get to the party system. Like, we'll have to have some sort of iterator here that loops through the party members inside of the player. We might even change player to be called party at that point, but we'll take care of that in a future. That'll be a future goal. Right now we're just focusing on one, getting the one spawned and animated, and then from there we can try something else. Yeah, so then it's just a sprite sheet bundle here that we're gonna spawn. And I wonder what the timer does here. Let's see if there's any documentation on that. So if we do another parent spawn bundle, sprite, what was it? Sprite sheet bundle. We're not going to scale it all at the sprite at all right now. We're just going to leave it the same size. We want to also tell it that this is part of the game state for the battle view. We'll insert that, but yeah, I do want to see what the timer is. I'm just going to copy that real quick. Tracks elapsed time. Enters the finish state once duration is reached. Non-repeating timers will stop tracking and stay in the finish state until reset. Repeating timers will only be in the finish state on each tick. Okay, so I think what this is essentially some component state which will allow us to animate. Question is, why is it use with? Is it because we're no longer in, yeah, we have to go back to our 5.0 tag, and it should be insert. That's what I thought. With is the old 0.4 style of inserting components on a entity. So yeah, so that looks correct, and then it's repeating true, so that means that every 0.1 seconds or 100 milliseconds we'll have sort of this timer that ticks over. Okay, and then now we have to create a, outside of this, we need like an animation system. In fact, I'm probably just gonna call this animation out the system in it, because you can probably figure out that it's a system. And yeah, we'll just copy this right over into here. Okay. That looks correct. And then we will need to bring in Bevy. Prelude. And then the speed of the animation is determined by that timer component, which is pretty cool. I like that setup. And then in here we can say add system, animation, and then animate sprite system. System. And it's gonna error because it doesn't know what that is, but we'll load it in. And then let's also sort these by line, like alphabetically. Yeah, that looks pretty good now. So now if we go back to our thing here, we can see that we're loading in this sort of battle view for the player, and then it's animated. And right now it's gonna display at 0, 0, which isn't what we want. Positioning, we'll probably just hard code it in here for right now, but we will have to write something that positions it in the future when the battle view sort of opens up. I'll have to figure out how we want to do that. I think it should be fairly straightforward though. We'll see. Sweet. Yeah, so you can see it's like in the center of the screen, which I think is 0, 0 in our particular case. And it's animating as well. Now the sprite is way too small, so I think the next thing we want to do is just scale it. And we can do that by editing the transform here. Similarly to how it was done before. And I guess there's that function on here called splat, which creates a vector with all elements sent to V, which this seems pretty nice. Let's try increasing it by a factor of 10. It might be much too large, but see, 150 times 10 is 1500. So likely much too big. That's interesting that we got that error. Panicked at texture ID in the GPU render resource context. That's very interesting. It was working just a second ago. All we did was add a transform, a scale transform, and that's it. So we're doing something wrong there. I don't know what. It could be that as soon as I try to switch back to the other view, it crashes. If we remove that, does it still err? Also, our sprite didn't get any bigger on the scale that we set, so something is going on with that. Yeah, so something, if we remove this, I think we'll see that it's fine. It looks like something isn't getting cleaned up correctly when we remove the sprite sheet bundle in Bevy's renderer, which causes that issue. We did have this working though, so it's a bit strange that it's suddenly failing now. Just trying to go back and sort of undo some of the changes we made here. It could be related to the animation component as well, or system. As soon as I try to switch back to the map view, we get that error. Descriptor allocator is dropped while some descriptor sets were not deallocated. So that particular error, actually a lot of these errors are just because we crashed without, basically we panicked, so that's why it throws these errors. But yeah, I guess we need to see a stack trace. Let's try to see why that's happening. I think it's equal 1, right? Yeah. Is it just 1? Yeah, there we go. That works fine. Then we crash. Yeah, the bind group is freaking out. Wonder if that's because we're switching cameras. Although that was working before. Let's see what we've changed. Added the animation system. We added the battle view entity. One thing we're doing is we're actually removing that entity. We're despawning it. Let's go see if there's an issue for this. Well, so definitely something to ask later on. For right now, I think we're fine. Let's re-add back some of the code that we had here. It's definitely not the new player thing that we added. I'm fairly certain it's the fact that we actually despawn the entities in here. I think we need to undo that and maybe it'll work again. Cannot sample empty range. Okay, that's an interesting error. Let's just remove that system. Clear battle screen. Did have that working though, so it seems unlikely that that's the issue. It's almost like setting it to is visible false is causing it to fail. That particular time it instantly failed as soon as we try to switch to the battle view. What if we not render the player at all? What does that do for us? It seems to be directly related to the player and not anything else. Let's try it again like this though, just to make sure. Yeah, okay, so I'm wondering if it's because the sort of sprite bundles are nested under this parent. I can't imagine that being the case, but maybe it's possible. Also, the fact that the transform doesn't seem to be working at all is a little weird. Like, we should have a much bigger scale than that, for sure. Yeah, it's completely random when it fails too. That's so weird. It fails pretty often. But yeah, I'm not sure at all why that sprite isn't scaling up at all. Like, it should be 20 times bigger than what it is initially, and it didn't change size at all. Which is weird. Well, I'm a little unsure what to do because of this apparent bug that we're coming across. I suppose we should report this as an issue. So I'm gonna do that first. Just copy this whole thing. Issues. Let's just make sure that it's not a known issue already. Main panicked at texture ID. Operating system and version. I don't know what version it is. What you did? Swapping visible sprite bundle. Visible sprites causes a crash. Sprites are visible causes a crash. Crash. Alright, hold on. Code example. Spawn entity. Switch system. I'm just gonna remove what you expect to happen. I expect there's no crash. Like, I think that's pretty obvious. What actually happened? I mean, isn't that described? But what? Well, no. What actually happened? I received a crash inside of the WHP renderer. Stack trace. Wait, hold on. Why is that on spawn it's failing? Gameplay enemy spawns spawner spawn. That's the enemy spawner. What? Why would that crash? Makes zero sense. I don't think that's where we're coming from. It seems unlikely anyways. We'll include it in our list here. Generate swapping which sprites are visible causes a crash. Code example, spawn entity, switch systems. Alright, one thing we should determine before we submit this bug report, and I think it would be helpful, is if it's due to the parent. If it's due to the player being the parent, and then these sprite bundles being children of that. And so if instead we pull this out, mark that as commented it out, and we make it a separate entity, and change this to commands. Do we still get the same error? I think that's an important case here. Perhaps it's related to how things are being updated. No, yeah, we still get the same error. Interestingly enough, we didn't see our battle view sprite at all. Let's try to get back to that battle view state. Like, it was there for like a split second and then it disappeared. I wonder if that's because it's behind the background, which has a Z index of like 10 or something. We just take that. Something further up. Oh, right. Load. Just bringing that out above the background. It's weird though that it shows up when it's a parent of. Well, I guess actually that's not weird because that player sprite receives a translation. Okay, that actually makes sense. Come on, let's see if we can get it to show up this time. It's still showing up behind the background. Let's drop this down to 5. I don't think that should matter though. It should be behind. It should be in front. The player sprite should be in front. Why is that happening? This is so frustrating. Like, the other thing I wonder too is perhaps it's related to the animation. Like, if that sprite is hidden, we're changing it. Maybe it shouldn't crash though. Yeah, that animation has nothing to do with it. What if we made the sprite a part of the map view as well? Okay, so actually our scaling does work there. Interesting. And the positioning, like, it's definitely showing up on top. It's like almost as though the sprite sheet bundle have a visible? Yes, it does. Hmm. Yeah, I'm gonna go with this being a sprite sheet bundle issue. When swapping visible state, when changing this visible state for sprite sheet bundle. I don't have any additional information to that out. So Bevy version 5, operating system Windows 10. Pretty sure we're using the Vulkan renderer here, but they don't ask for that. Yeah, I mean, we can go into it a little deeper too and see if we can figure out what's going on. So essentially what's happening is it's trying to create a bind group, and it can't because it can't find the associated texture view for that particular resource. Why it can't find a texture view, I'm not sure. But that definitely seems like an issue that I didn't cause. Alright, well, we opened our bug. So the only thing we can do is really just try to work around the issue until that gets fixed. How do we do that? Well, one way is to do what? Instead of swapping is visible between which things get rendered, we could completely remove the entity associated with that particular view and then recreate it. But how do we do that in a way that's like generic? There isn't really a good way, easy way of doing that that's generic. We would need to know how it was created in the first place, and we have no way of knowing that because each thing that's associated with this sorry, I'm in the wrong place, and each thing that's associated with this game state component that we have, like, we don't know how, and nothing tells us how to create it other than this code here, and so our visibility switcher isn't gonna know. I mean, we could have like a spawn player battle view and a spawn player map view, and then we destroy everything each time, but that just seems like too much of a hassle. What if, for the time being, we create a material for the battle sprite? And then sort of this Atlas animation stuff we turn off right now. Since we know that works, and it just seems to be the sprite sheet bundle that's broken. So do this like this. We delete the timer, or rather, just we'll comment it out right now. That's kind of a bummer because we had like a texture that we were definitely loading in, and that worked. It's supposed to be that. Like we saw the animation was working. It's just swapping the is visible flag boolean was causing a crash in that case. Although we're still getting a crash, so that's interesting. What changed between this and this? Like if I just don't spawn this at all, do we still get the same crash? And if so, what's the difference between our two things there? Like, what changed? Like, yeah, why does this work when we have the player sprite there? But when we add a second entity with a battle player sprite, it crashes. Why? Because of the transform? Like, is that the whole reason why it crashes? Like, if I change what the transform is, does that change it in any way to fix it? No. It's just having more than one sprite bundle somehow causes a crash. Great. So it seems to be unrelated to... We need to amend this for sprite bundle. It seems to not cause a crash when there is... But this is the weird thing though, like, this is a completely new entity here that's associated with the battle view. And we have a different, completely new entity for the map view. Like, we already have map view entities that this works with. That's why it's confusing to me. Like, our enemy here and our spawner, like, this creates a sprite bundle. So we already have more than one sprite, but they're all map view right now. And so now we have this one that's not map view, it's the battle view. And when we swap over to it, it crashes. Why? Why does it crash? What's different about it between the first run it does, where this is set to false and the other ones are set to true, and the opposite of that, where a bunch of them are set to false and this one's set to true? Like, I don't see the difference there. The only thing I can think of is we have a bunch of them being sent to false. Maybe this one isn't the particular problem. Well, we know it is because if we remove this code here, it works. It'd be nice if we knew more about the bind group it's creating and what entity it's referred to. Like, some more debug information here would be nice. This texture ID might be helpful though, but I don't know what texture that's referring to. I'm assuming it's this one here that we have. Yeah, that's such a weird issue. If we want to try to fix this, ideally I should go into create bind group and like, I should fork Bevy, pull it down, and run it locally and attempt to reproduce this issue in the Bevy code base directly. Because it only seems to be related to, like, this particular one, which is real strange. I'm not sure why. Like, this is going to be hard to reproduce in the Bevy code base. Not that hard, but kind of difficult because... Yeah, I am curious, what if we remove the other sprites? Just call spawn instead. And then here we just call spawn, and we don't call spawn bundle. But what happens then? Like, okay, we only have the player sprite and the battle player sprite. We only have the two sprites. We don't have these other ones that are popping up around anywhere. Yeah, it still errors. So it seems to be directly related. It doesn't seem to be related to like the number of sprites at all. It seems to be directly related to this one turning off and this one, or this one turning back on. I think it's this one turning off that's crashing. But why? This one turns off fine. Like it gets set to is visible false fine, but why doesn't this one? I don't know. I can't explain that. It's kind of frustrating. There's literally no difference between the two. Just other than when they get turned on or off. Which shouldn't matter. Like, what if we reverse our code for the our update visibility code? What if we reverse this? Just curious. I want to see. Now we should see the sort of huntress that we have on the map view, and on the game, like the gameplay view, we should see something else. Whoa. Why is that all I see? Oh, right, because the map is no longer visible. Wait, why? Because when it first gets created. Okay. Yeah. Is that a different texture ID? I'm sure these are unique every time you run it, unfortunately. .69BF is a different ID, but I'm sure if I ran it again, it would be a completely different ID again. Yeah. It still failed though when we switched from the battle view back to the map view. Like, that's consistent. What if they're always visible? We don't care. We're just always gonna make them visible. And we can definitely rule it as being the is visible being set. Yeah. So something weird's going on. Sometimes is visible causes that issue to... Okay, the real question though is, why is this sprite not on top of our other one? Our background here. Let's fix that. We'll just make it always visible for right now. It's a bit of a mess, but... Man, that's a nasty bug that we came across. It really kind of puts us back. And I don't know like a good way around it. Like, we kind of backed ourselves into a corner with the way that we coded some of this. Alright, so transform, let's set this back to this transform. 20 was way too big, let's try 10 for right now. Oh, we can also add the animation back. We know that doesn't cause the issue. So we can do this. Reinsert the timer, delete this. sprite sheet bundle, and then I think that's the texture atlas is the texture atlas handle, right? Yeah. Okay. That's still way too big. Let's scale it down some more. Just say by 5. 5 times bigger than what it is normally. Cool. Okay, so why isn't it showing up on our battle screen though? That's a really great question. The z-index is 12, and our battle screen z-index is 5. So it shouldn't show up on top. We have a different camera though. That shouldn't change anything. The new camera might cause a crash as well. I wonder if we should try to change the current camera instead. Oh, that gets messy though. Still thinking about why this isn't showing on top of this sprite. Like it's added afterwards. Maybe that's why. But the ordering, like this one should be on top, like based off of the z-index here. That should be the one that's on top. But perhaps that's not how sprite orders work. And maybe I also need to change the global transform. I don't think so though. One thing though is that I actually don't even need this here because we remove the entity when we despawn here. Yeah. And same with this. We don't need to tell it it's the battle view because we despawn it when you exit that state. Actually, maybe we haven't backed into ourselves into too much of a corner like I initially thought. Perhaps we can spawn the players, the sprites here for the player. We need to change a few things to get that to work, but I think that might be a good way of doing it. And then it would be apparent on this battle entity. That's probably a better way of doing it anyways. Because then you're not keeping those entities around in state. In memory. Not that that matters very much. I don't think we're going to use much memory anyways, but it's still probably a good idea to clean up and have like clean memory. Otherwise, you're gonna get very, like, sort of, I don't know a good word for it, but like you're gonna get some weird stuff if you don't do that. Which means what? Okay, so one of the reasons why we don't want to despawn some of the entities when we switch states is because the map one in particular takes a while to like generate, and it's randomly generated, which means we don't want to randomly generate it again. We want it to be the same map that the player's already been on. So that particular item has to stay in state. We can do that though by separating out the map from what gets rendered more. Like right now there's a very like 1-to-1 ratio of like this is the tile map and like the generation that goes along it. Like we set the tile map directly and that's how we render things. But well, yeah, another way we could do it is we could pre-generate the map and then create the rendered data from that data. It's probably a better way of doing it anyways, because when we go to save and like store that data, it'll make it easier to do that because it's not tied into the rendering data directly. The question is, do we want a separate entity for it, or do we want to keep it on the same entity? If it's a separate entity, then it makes it easier to despawn and spawn things in. Yeah, interesting. Okay, I think the way that I want to do it is yeah, this is gonna be a bit of refactoring work that we're gonna have to do, but I think it'll be better in the end. Just looking at the time, it's 11:30 here where I live. We can keep going till 12, and then we're gonna have to stop after that. Alright. So with that in mind, like, it just means so much more work though. Like we'll need like the player will have to have like, it can't just be spawn player. Like spawn player will happen when you start the game, but we'll also need spawn player map view and spawn player battle view, essentially. Which is fine. Like those are gonna be different entities anyways, really, and different rendering entities at the very least. Yeah, just means a lot of changes. So spawn player map view. And basically, yeah, all these commands. The cool thing about spawn player though, it's gonna be less stuff here. We get done with it. Smaller anyways, but yeah, that's slightly annoying. So spawn player is just gonna be this, really. How do we tie it though? Like, this is gonna have to be not this, but something more like this. Because we have to tie it to an entity parent. And actually, what does that look like? If we go to battle and mute child builder. So yeah, that's what it's gonna look like. And then this gets called from that particular state creation logic system. Because we need that parent to make sure that we can clean up well. Although we could just keep putting game state entities on there, or components on the entities, and then just loop through and clean up all the ones that have that game state. Then we can spawn them in separate systems. No, I don't want to do that though. So here's spawn. Essentially we need this. Let's mute. We actually don't need the texture atlases here. This would be parent. And we can kind of just copy some of this and delete some of it. And this would be spawn player battle view. Actually, yeah, I'm just gonna delete that node. And all this stuff gets copied to there. Yeah, I just wonder how long it takes to create this stuff. So like when we're switching entities like this, we're gonna have to have a load screen. I don't know. Probably not. Maybe not. I hope not. Then we need texture atlases, which is going to be and mute, resource mute, assets, texture atlas. I think that's correct. Let's go up here and look. Oh, we deleted it. Oh, that's fine. And this would be parent. So now player is much more simple. And actually that cleans up a lot of stuff because then we don't need this stuff here at all. We don't need the update visibility. And anywhere where we do insert game state can get deleted. Because we're actually gonna literally clean that stuff up. Not right away, but we'll do it. Can return that. Okay. Yeah. So we'll have to actually call spawn map entity here when yeah. And then our generate becomes a lot different now. We'll have to come up with our own like tile We could just use the types that come from tile map, but it'll be a bit different from what it is now. We'll have like an array of tiles. Yeah. So I think today we're not gonna have a release because we ran into this issue, and we're changing how the stuff is. We're changing how this works quite a bit, and I don't know if I'm gonna actually be able to get it done in time for the stream to end. But we'll just have a tag like day 7 and day 8 or something in the code so that you know it's both, and like because of the big refactor, I think we'll do something like that. Maybe not, but something like that. Let's just spawn bundle there. Alright. Do we get any crashes since we changed all this stuff? Probably. It's my guess. Maybe not. Oh, P doesn't do anything anymore. Oh, it does actually do some stuff. The camera system doesn't work when we swap out. Where's our player at? Do we have a player sprite? No, we don't, because we're not spawning the player. Cool. Also, the enemy. We didn't undo this change, so those aren't spawning in. Okay, cool. Man, that's the other thing though, too. Like, I want to keep all these entities around, especially these spider sprites, because alright, here's what we're gonna do. I think this is gonna be better. The map view stuff will stick around. We'll keep that. And we'll only make the battle view stuff disappear and not disappear. For now. We might change that in the future, but for now, let's do that. Because otherwise it means a whole bunch of different stuff like that we'll have to keep around separately in state, which maybe isn't a bad thing, but don't know if I want to go through the hassle of that right now. And our players still not going to show up on the map because we separated that out, which I think is still good. I think that part's still important. Okay, we want to return some of this stuff. Hold on. It's visible. That's fine. Actually, we can undo this change. Is this the only change in the file? Yeah. Let's discard that change. These changes are fine. Those changes are fine. This change we want to undo. And yeah, sure, just undo all those changes. Spawn player, we'll keep those changes. We're gonna make it a little different though. And then undo those changes, yeah. Okay. So in the player, let's see. I think we want to keep it a separate entity still for the map player sprite. Maybe a different, or maybe a parent-child relationship? I don't know. We'll just do it like this right now. And then here, this particular function, spawn player battle view, is actually going to get called from within this. And then we'll pass the parent to here. And we'll have to have the texture atlas in here too. Okay, and asset server, materials, texture assets. And this isn't public, so that's why I can't import it. Right, and then we're gonna have an error somewhere, yeah, in here. This is really not the best place to put this, but it's fine for right now. Till we get the more of the map battle stuff implemented. I was hoping we'd get that done today, but this kind of set us back quite a bit. So mute texture atlases, res mute assets, texture atlas. Send it like this. Oh, right, because this is not how you're supposed to do this. There we go. Instant crash. Cannot sample empty range RNG. Oh, that's the one that we know about. Yes, that is in our generation code. Okay, one reason why player is a part of that. We'll have to fix that code. Think about how we have to do that. And this will also need a reference to that player entity. We still get a crash when we switch back. Interesting. Even though it deletes that sprite, we still crash. Why? If we don't run this code, it's fine. Everything works fine. It's right? Let's just check. No, it still crashes. It didn't before, so something changed. None of these have that game state. Man, I was really hoping we could get around this issue here. Alright. Let's, I guess, just set this back to true for the year. We're gonna have to do it for the map view. It's gonna be a pain, but we're gonna have to separate out the logic there. Otherwise, this isn't gonna work. Okay, now we just did that, but our player isn't showing up. Is that because I removed it? Oops. Yeah, okay. I do want to try to see why it's not scaling it at all. So weird. Maybe because it's a parent of or it's a child of the battle view. Hey, that works. Okay. It seems like a good place to commit, so that's what we're doing. Oh, well, hold on. Don't want to commit quite yet. We added the Huntress. Means we have to update our README. So we will pull out the Huntress is Creative Commons 000. So essentially the same license as CC00. I think it's the same one as this. But let's go make sure. Creative Commons 0. Oh, this is different. This is 4.0. This is the right one. Is there like a summary of it? Yeah, there we go. I'll link to that. Just going to remove that it's the license. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Credits appreciated. Well, we will credit you, sir. Or ma'am, I don't know. We will credit them for their work. They do a really good job too. I might even pay for some of these, although I have to figure out how to use paid stuff in the game versus not, because obviously I can't upload those to GitHub. But yeah, different license probably. Maybe just stick with the free ones, we'll see. Or maybe at some point I stop updating the GitHub repo with assets and just update it with code. That might be what we do. We'll see. We won't do that until we're much further along though. We'll have more of the game sort of done before we start doing that. Okay. Yeah. I'm pretty sure this person doesn't have a different name other than this. I can link to their Twitter too. Yeah, so add a comma there too, just to make it cleaner. Is there not a license for this? I don't think there was. Like, oh, there is. No, here it is. Provide links to the source. Oh, so we do have to keep that link to the source in there. I'm just gonna include this one. Source. License is the 4.0, right? Yeah. I think it's the same as this, so. comma there too. Instead of the full Twitter thing, let's just do the @ like we did above. I think if they see the @ it's probably a good enough indicator that it's Twitter. I hope so, anyways. Alright, let's make sure that this is the same license. Okay, so 4.0, yeah, okay. Changed. How? View state. Added. New player battle view character sprite. Updated. Readme with new credits. What else have we done? Too much. See, added animation system, which really we just copied from the Bevy example. But hey, it works. No reason to change what works. Oh, you know what? Let's copy that real quick and alright, whatever. It's fine. It committed. That's cool. Let's fix this issue though. How do we want to do it? Because somehow we're going to need to reference the player down here as well. But we need to know that this is the player sprite for the map view. I think we're just going to cheat right now, and we're just going to do this. It is so cheaty, but it will do what we want and make the player move. And I think instead of this being a, like, this just needs to sort of be an indicator, hey, this is the player. And then this actually needs to be a resource, I think, because it doesn't really have to be an entity. There's not going to be more than one player. Yeah, so that's kind of a little cheaty hack to get it to work again. And then that works. And we can switch rapidly between them. And somehow it doesn't break. Okay, cool. Fixed issue where player didn't move anymore. Is it? Yeah, those are just all warnings. Well, there's no time like the present to clean up warnings. Cleaning code equals easier time later on to refactor, so we might as well do it now. Alright, what else is giving me issues here? I think that's just saying it's modified now. I really wish there was a different color for warnings here. Okay, we're just gonna underscore that for now. Oh, apparently we don't use materials here. That is nice. So we don't have to pass it in there. Okay. Cargo run, cargo build release. Just want to see all the places. Unreachable. Okay, cool. Don't care about that. Delete these unused imports. There we go. Clean build. That's what I like to see. Let's run cargo format 2 on it. Just for fun, so that everything changes. Love it. But it also means our code is much more consistent now and cleaner to look at. So it's good that we're doing that. Yeah, hopefully that's not an issue. Let's see. Fixed warnings and ran cargo format. I guess we're gonna do a release after all today. Although not much has changed. So, I mean, a lot of stuff changed, but in terms of finishing up the battle view like I wanted to, we didn't get as much done there, unfortunately. So, yeah, that's kind of a bummer. So we ran into that bug. And hopefully we can get that fixed. If in the meantime, we will work around it with what we're doing here. I think next stream, what we're gonna want to do is, I think it's probably a good idea to remove the things that are rendering comparatively to what's not rendering. When you switch game states, I think that's a better method than swapping is visible to true or false. I think in some cases we won't want to do that. Like for example, like if we're rendering some UI, we probably want that to just appear on top of everything. In which case we'll just give it a higher Z index and just make it appear on top. And then when the UI disappears, we'll obviously delete the UI entities, if that makes sense. And then spawn them when you open the menu. But for the map view, we need to make sure that we clear all the rendering stuff out when we switch to the battle view. And then when we switch back, it should respawn those rendering objects. And we need to think about how we can do that in a smart way. And I think the answer to that is in some cases we will likely, like with the player sort of sprite, we will want to just wipe out the player entity for the map, but keep the player stuff around in resources, in a resource, instead of as an entity. And in other cases, we will want to actually, and well, that leads to another point too, where well, we're still gonna need a lot of the player, like an enemy. Well, we'll have to figure out a good way of doing it, because we'll need to keep the position data, like where the sprites are located on the screen. We'll need to make sure that sticks around. Perhaps a better way of doing it is to keep the player as an entity. It has its own transform, and then there's it has a child that's the rendering element, and then we just clear the children out when you switch what game state you're in. Particularly between, what we really care about is between the map view and this battle view. We want to make sure that we clear out all the other rendering stuff. But like I said, we'll do that in the next stream. I think probably Monday will be the next stream. Let me just take a look here at my schedule. Yeah, Monday, and then we'll do a stream on Wednesday and Friday and maybe Saturday as well. We'll see. But yeah, thanks for watching today, guys. Sorry we ran into a bug, which caused us to kind of change our direction and how we're doing things, but I think this will lead to better code anyways. and make things a little bit cleaner as far as like these are the things that render for this particular view, and they get cleared out if you switch views, switch states in the game. So I think that'll be better code in anyways, versus switching is visible, which doesn't really make sense. But thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the stream. And yeah, I'll get a release pushed up, and I'll get this stream pushed to YouTube and everything as well. So have a great day, and thank you again for watching.